In today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know about the union type in TypeScript. We are first going to just give you an overview of what a union type is. Then we're going to get into the syntax of a union type and then talk about one tricky thing that occurs with unions that might cause you problems if you don't know about it. So we're going to make sure to cover that as well. So first off, a union type is a type that is formed from two or more types, and it will represent values that may be any of those types. So you might say that this value here is going to be of type string, or it's going to be of type number, or it's going to be an array. You're saying that that value is going to be one of several different types. So the syntax for this, I think this operator has a different name, but it's like the bar operator. It is the straight vertical line. And right here on line 18, I have a function called console ID, and it takes one argument here, an ID. And what I'm doing is I'm giving it a type annotation here, and I'm saying that it is going to be a number or it's going to be a string. So I'm using this bar operator to say this is going to be a number or it's going to be a string. So I must pass this console ID function an ID that's a number or a string. Now, you could do more here. I could also do like a number array or something like that as well, and that is still valid. Then I would need to pass this a number, string, or number array. Now, I would generally recommend not having type unions of like 3, 4, 5 different types, and I would probably create a type alias that represents that type at that point. Now, to create that type alias, you might say that this is going to be a number or a string or a number array and different things like that. But when you're just kind of inlining it here, I would probably create a custom type just to represent that in a bit more of a readable way and create a type alias for that. But I will cover type aliases here in future videos. All right. So the syntax here for the union types in TypeScript is you can use your annotation like normal with the colon, and then you can use the bars to separate some types to say that this value is going to be one of these types. And you can see that when I call this function with a number, that is totally valid. When I call it with a string, that is also valid. I get no errors. But if I call it with an object here, I get an error. And it says type of this object that has an ID of string is not assignable to a parameter of type string, number, or number array, because this is my type union of all of these different types here. So it's going to enforce that I must pass it either a number or a string. Now, one tricky thing with type unions is that to perform operations on a value within a union type, the operation must exist on all members of the union type, or you need to first narrow the type before performing those operations. So what I mean by this is that in my function here, my ID, it's going to be of type number or string. So if I wanted to perform an operation on my ID, well, that operation must exist on all members of this union. And what are the members of this union? Well, it's going to be a number or a string. Those are the two members. So right now, I can only perform operations on the ID that exist on both a number in JavaScript and on a string in JavaScript. So as you can see, if I try to do id.toUppercase, well, the toUppercase method is a method that only exists on strings within JavaScript. It does not exist on numbers. So I actually get an error here. I get an error saying property toUppercase does not exist on type string or number, because this operation, it only exists on strings. It doesn't exist on strings and numbers, both members of this type union. So I cannot do this. And to do this, I would first need to narrow my type. And the way that you could do this is with an if check. I could say if type of ID is equal to a string, then in that case, well, I know that this ID value is going to be a string. And I can just do my id.toUppercase without an error here. And you can see I don't get an error. And then in this else block, well, by the time I get to this else block, I know it's not a string. And if this ID has to be a number or a string, well, that means that I know that by the time it gets here, the ID is going to be a number, because I already checked whether it was a string or not. So here I could do some operation that only exists on numbers. So you can see I already get autocomplete of all the methods that exist on numbers. So I get to fixed, to precision, and different things like that. So I could do to fixed and do it to 1 digit or something like that. All right. So keep in mind that when you use a type union and then you want to use that value and perform some operation on that value, that operation must exist on all members of your type union. So in this case, my members are a number and a string. So if I didn't have any type narrowing, I could only use methods that exist on both numbers and strings. But if you do want to do some different methods that only exist on one of the members, you first need to narrow your type, which you can do by using an if condition, or you could potentially use a type assertion or something like that, asserting that it is a certain type. But I think that generally I prefer to do some condition like this. All right, so that is type unions within TypeScript. Hopefully this gives you a good idea on how they work and an understanding of how they work and how you can create them, and also makes you aware of kind of this tricky thing that some people can get a little bit confused with and really frustrated with TypeScript when they start getting errors like this. All right, so thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one.